I showed you how the Trump derangement syndrome is kicking in again, with critics suggesting that Donald Trump is undermining NATO.
I can't believe that Trump just said this about another NATO country and what Russia could do to them. This was during a rally in South Carolina where he said that he had a conversation with a U.S. official that said if a country was falling behind on their payments to NATO, that they would not protect them, and that if Russia wanted to attack them, he would encourage it. He would encourage Russia to attack another country because they fell late on their payments. First, that's not how NATO works. There is a target of 2% of your GED that you have to pay into it. It's a target, not a requirement. And from day one, Trump has demanded that every single one of those countries hit that target number, which many of them cannot. You're talking about anywhere between $14 billion to $100 and something billion.
Okay, so we have to get in this story about the media, the left-wing mainstream media in the United States pushing fake news yet again, because this time it's Russia, 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 part two. You know how they always try to say, oh, Trump is in bed with Putin. He's a Putin puppet. He's working for the Kremlin. Because the Democrats, they don't have any good policies. They don't have anything good to run on. Whatever happened to Build Back Better? Whatever happened to all the adults are in a room now when you have an old senile man going over there to the Vatican, pooping on himself, stumbling, falling all over the place. His own DOJ is calling him senile. They don't have any good policies to run on, and the man that they have propped up is an empty suit. Weekend at Bernie's. So what they're doing is just creating fake news stories to try to brainwash people to vote for Democrats instead of Republicans. They've made up so many stories. Remember they said, oh, Trump, he was over there calling the people who died in World War II idiots or losers or something like that. They completely make up stories and then they run with it as if they have hard evidence, as if it's the gospel truth when it's a made up fake news lie. So now they're saying Trump wants Russia to destroy NATO. So the story is about comments Trump made about NATO needing to pay. These individual NATO countries need to put money into their own militaries, match at least 2% of their annual GDP. And most countries in NATO are well below that 2%, and they're refusing. They don't want to. Presidents for decades, since the founding of NATO, have let these countries get away with it. Trump came years ago. He's been saying this for years now, that these guys need to build up their militaries. They need to sink money, invest money into the militaries. These countries want to talk all this crap about how powerful NATO is when they're not investing any type of resources. The German military is absolute gutted, shot, and pathetic. A bunch of fat old men with no training, minimal equipment. The UK, the Royal Navy, is half the size of what it should be. The UK Army is shrinking in size, constantly shrinking in size. By 2025, they should be down to 60-some thousand men. 60-something thousand. And about a third of that are even going to be combat soldiers. And most of those guys aren't even going to be equipped and trained properly. So you're talking about a terribly crappy institution that's propped up by perception and propaganda, by egos of people who live in the Western world, thinking that NATO is the most powerful organization in history when it's really a paper tiger. And I did a video breaking down how crappy NATO is, how ill prepared the readiness of NATO is terrible. And I did a detailed video about that, and I had to do a lot of details because when I make videos like that, people get their feelings hurt because they've been believing for years that NATO is oh so powerful, they can wipe out anybody, when all of the evidence shows that that's not true. So these countries are not meeting their targets. We got this guy at the clip that I showed at the beginning making excuses, talking about, well, it's a lot of money, they can afford it. I thought these European countries were so rich. I thought they were first world countries. Oh, this is a civilized world. Look at us compared to Africa, to East Asia. Look at us compared to the Middle East. We're the civilized people. But you're broke. You don't have any money. Nah, they have money. They just are taking advantage of the United States. They said, look, U.S., we know you're broke too. You're $34 trillion in debt. But we know that you're going to keep printing money to spend $1 trillion a year on the military. And because you're doing that, and because we can just have you put bases over here in Europe, we can spend our money on other stuff, and we don't have to run up a debt like you are. So we're going to take advantage of you. These countries don't care, man. Let's look at some clips about Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, Canada. I thought Canada was doing so well. They don't have a massive population. Their GDP isn't that massive, but still. They're not trying to spend a military budget that's equal to 2% GDP. They're like, look, we got better things to spend this money on. Let's look at Trudeau.
Right now?
Say it?
Are you happy with Canadian defense spending as it is right now?
Well, they're moving up, and they're moving up substantially, and they're starting to do very well economically, and that has something to do with it. And yeah, they're getting up to a level that's getting to be very acceptable. They have been under the 2%, obviously, but they're moving up. We discuss it.
There was an emergency meeting called today, and after that meeting with all the leaders, Trump came out and said that everyone had agreed to hit that 2% target. He said that they were going to do it quickly, that it would take perhaps a few short years, and he said that everybody thanked him for his contribution, that there was more unity than NATO had seen in years. Now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has a slightly different version of events in terms of what it is that Canada has committed to. He says the same thing, in fact, he's been saying this week, long before that emergency meeting, that Canada is committed to aiming towards that 2% goal. And the word towards is important there because Canada doesn't have a plan to actually reach the 2% goal. Justin Trudeau also says that this is about the quality of the commitments, the military commitments that Canada is making. He says that Canada continues to pull its weight. It is always there when NATO needs it. But that doesn't mean he's prepared to hit that 2% target. Now,
So he's an example of NATO in general. This is how most of these countries in NATO are. You got some of them meet the target, but most of them aren't. Most of them are freeloaders, weak countries that you can question. Why would the United States even want these weak countries in NATO? Because they have nothing to offer militarily. Well, what they do have to offer are bodies, especially the ones in Eastern Europe. So if something does pop off with Russia, with China, they have a lot of weak bodies that the UK and the United States will push out in front to do the dying first, like they're doing right now with Ukraine, how NATO is having Ukraine do the dying for them. So if something pops off, these Eastern European countries could be used as cannon fodder while the NATO masterminds try to come up with some type of plan, or why they try to ramp up production, which takes years actually. But these countries in general are begging to join NATO. They want to be in, they want to brag, they want to show up and have the NATO flag in their country, at their headquarters in their countries. But they don't want to meet their obligations. Let's get into what Trump actually said.
They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
So clearly here, it's a joke, but people are saying, oh, look at this. He's saying if they don't pay, he's going to let the Russians wipe them out. Well, if they're so afraid of the Russians, why aren't they building up their own militaries? Why are they required on the taxpayers to take inflation in the United States? Because the United States has to constantly print money to spend all of this on its military, while these other countries in NATO don't spend. So you don't want to invest any money or very minimal money into your military. Then something pops off of Russia. You're saying, oh, Russia is so scary. Russia is such a bad guy. You want to fearmonger your European populations about it. But you don't want to invest any money. That's what Trump is trying to say. He's saying you guys need to put money into this. He's been telling these guys this for years. Some of them have slightly increased. Some are making excuses, like Justin Trudeau. Well, we're going to move towards it. Canada is not trying to spend that type of money. And these other countries who want to be part of NATO and want to freeload off the United States, they don't want to put that type of money in there. They have other things to pay for, but they just want to be under the U.S.'s protection if something pops out. If they're so afraid of something popping out, why don't they just leave NATO? Why don't they just be neutral? Something that Finland should have been, but Finland let these warmongers, these leftists in their country, fearmonger them and talk trash. Oh, Russia, Russia, Russia. They fell into a Russia scare. Now they're in NATO. And if something pops off, they're going to get caught up in it. Before that, they would have been neutral. So if these European countries are so afraid of Russia. Putin is going to annihilate them. Why don't they just leave NATO and declare that they're neutral? Oh, they're not going to do that. So Trump's intention is to make NATO stronger. The United States is investing money into the military. All of these countries in Europe are properly investing money into the military. Then NATO will, as a whole, be much stronger. But these countries in Europe just want to freeload. And the media is just going to twist this as, oh, Trump, he's in bed with Putin. Russia. Don't vote for Trump because Trump is anti-American. Trump wants NATO to be wiped out. So that's going to be the story that they push, but we all know it's a bunch of lies, it's fake news, it's propaganda. Let me know what you guys think. Leave me your thoughts below. Share the video. Thanks for watching.